What does it mean to have a rational worldview? Wouldn't it be a worldview that would have to comport with the laws of logic? I'm sure we would all agree that this must be the case. Otherwise, how could anyone justify believing in a worldview that contradicts itself? But think for a moment about whether your worldview can account for the laws of logic at all. For example, the law of non-contradiction states that A can't be not A at the same time and in the same relationship. For example, my car is in the garage and not in the garage at the same time is a false belief. But did you ever wonder why logical laws like these are true and how one can trust their reasoning process when interpreting reality? The Christian worldview can answer this because he has an absolute standard of reasoning whereby he thinks his thoughts after God's. And we know how God thinks because he has revealed some of his thoughts through his word. For example, in Genesis it tells us that God made man in his image. And because the laws of logic are a reflection of how God thinks, we will think accordingly since we are made in his image. The laws of logic are not just someone's opinion as to how we should reason with reality. Instead, they come from God's nature, and as a result, he has enabled all men to have reliable reasoning faculties. And to illustrate a few examples of God's logically consistent nature, 2 Timothy 2:13 says that God cannot deny himself. John 14:6 and Colossians 2:3 show that all knowledge and truth is found in Christ. Therefore, truth will always remain consistent. Hebrews 1:3 states that Christ upholds all things by the word of his power, so we can expect that no contradiction could ever occur in the universe, as well as trust that nature will always act in a uniform manner. So we can see that Christians have a basis for trusting in their reasoning process because we are made in the image of a rational God. But what about the atheists? Can their worldview account for the things that the Christian can account for? For example, if the Bible is not true, how can they know that the laws of logic always hold true? One response could be that our experience shows that the laws of logic have always held to be true. But since everyone's experience is limited and no one has observed the future, then what happens when someone finally discovers two contradictory claims that are both true? Would the atheist have a basis for dismissing such an assertion? Only the Christian has a basis by which they can say that contradictions could never occur in reality. But what about the atheist reasoning process? If the Bible is not true, then on what grounds can the atheist know that they can trust their reasoning faculties to produce accurate interpretations of reality? Some might say that they can reason just fine without the Bible. But this isn't really a response. The argument is not whether one has to profess their belief in the Bible in order to have a basis for rationality. Instead, the argument is that unless the Bible is true, one cannot have a basis for reliable reasoning faculties. And the Christian would fully agree that the atheist can reason just fine, but only on the basis that they are created in the image of God and are thinking his thoughts after him, all the while denying him. So, all logical reasoning is only possible because the Bible is true. Another response might be that the laws of logic do not require the truth of the Bible because they are simply made-up conventions by humans in order to explain reality. But the problem in this response is that conventions are exactly that, conventions. But what happens when one culture comes up with a description of reality that differs from another culture? Would this not be similar to a cultural convention, like how some drive on the left side of the road and others drive on the right? If the laws of logic were merely conventional, then all rational discourse would go out the window because anyone could pick whatever standard of reasoning that they wanted to. It would, again, be like arguing which side of the road we should drive on. Some atheists would further respond by saying that they can trust their reasoning faculties because of survival value. In other words, if we couldn't reason rationally, we could not survive. The problem is, survival value does not equate to truth. My left arm has survival value, but I wouldn't say that it's true or false, so we would have no reason to think that the laws of logic are true propositions simply because the chemical reactions in our brain have told us so. And if the laws of logic are simply the products of chemical reactions in the brain, then it would follow that these laws are not universal and absolute. And why would they be? They would differ from person to person depending on how the neurons in your brain were firing. Another argument might be that the laws of logic are just descriptions of how the universe behaves. But the problem is that it assumes the very thing that it's trying to prove. That is, how do we know that our interpretations of the universe are correct? Before man even formulated the laws of logic, he had to assume the reliability of his reasoning process. Therefore, just claiming the descriptive nature of the laws of logic answers nothing as to whether or not the atheist interpretations of reality are truthful. In conclusion, we have seen that it is the Christian who can account for his reasoning process by virtue of being created in the image of God. But the atheist, in order for him to justify his reasoning process, he must borrow from the Christian's epistemology in order to reason against it.